Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
This is Stress-Free Living. I'm Ray Samich, and I'd like to introduce to you my radio colleague for decades now, and my inspiration, and my dear brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you today?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you. Always better when we have this time together. And want to welcome our listeners, our viewers on the internet, our Zoom guests, and of course, Stress-Free Living Radio, our YouTube channel. If you are catching this show that you happen to be watching right now, or any of the 80 some shows that are out there currently, we welcome you as well. And we ask that you share the link on this program with family and friends that maybe can be inspired by some of the shows that we have produced over the years, really with the idea of helping you to cope with the stress in your life and helping others around you to cope with the stress in theirs. So many different topics that we discuss on this show that affect the level of stress that we feel. And Ratanjit, we've kind of gone on the surface, it seems, away from stress-free when we talk about adding the highest value. But when you really do isolate that topic, if we do that, ultimately we will have less stress, right? Because we're doing what we're wired to do.
Well, you see, ultimately, you cannot fool yourself. You can fool the whole world. And there are two kinds of wealth in this world. One is net worth, money and your house and car and all that. And other is self-worth. So self-worth is what you think of you. Self-worth only comes from adding the highest value unconditionally. So when you add the highest value, you increasing your self-worth. And eventually, this practice makes you increase your net worth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Ultimately,
what we try to do with this show, and you're retired now, although you're still involved in a lot of organizations, you sit on boards and things, but I'm still in the workplace every day. And I try to introduce this concept to my people around me, my team. And I said, there's such a difference between adding value and adding the highest value. And I take the time to really give them examples. I says, it's very, very easy to add value. I mean, you don't really have to think about it. You can instantly see something that you can do that will add value around you constantly. I mean, picking up a piece of paper on the floor that someone else left there and putting it into a trash can, you're adding value to everybody around you because you're making the environment cleaner and it's making it look better. Taking your dish off your table after you eat and washing it off and putting it in the dishwasher or cleaning it, putting it in the cabinet. Those are things, I mean, we add value all the time. It's so easy. We know what that is. But adding the highest value requires the brain, requires, knowing what's around you, the people that are involved. It causes you to evaluate your time, like to prioritize what is the best thing I can be doing at this moment based on what I'm capable of doing and what's needed. There's so much more to adding the highest value. But when you do it, you feel so good. You feel like you've really found your place on the planet, like you really are serving yourself and serving humanity the best way that you can, because you've taken the time to do it as good as you possibly could.
You know, adding the highest value is a journey. So that doesn't mean that you don't add value. No, no, we are only going to add the highest value. These small things I'm not going to do. So small things is part of adding the highest value. So it is
Right.
a journey. You are constantly adding value. You are constantly thinking. Adding value is when you are picking up a garbage or some paper or something from the floor, and that is adding value. But because adding value comes from the mindset of making your best better. So you are now picking up the garbage, and suddenly somehow the garbage can is not clean enough. So associated with so many things with that picking up, floor is not totally clean. And so all these things which you would begin to notice. So it is a journey. You're constantly getting your best better. But suddenly there are going to be 2 or 3 or 4 tasks which are conflicting. So there is a person who you are cleaning the floor, you are picking up something from the floor, and there is another person who suddenly had a attack or something which is he's feeling lightheaded and he's falling. So suddenly we are holding that person. It is more valuable than picking up something from the floor. So you
Right.
constantly be aware. So it requires a mindset of being present, being aware, being absolutely constantly with yourself. So you are using all your faculties, all your decisions, focus only on adding, constantly noticing where you can add value, where you're adding value makes a difference, than staying ensconced in basically your past or in your future. So
one of the things that I always hear from our listeners is that, okay, Ray, this sounds good. This makes sense. I do believe it. How do I do it? How do I do it? And so today we're going to introduce 8 steps that people can actually use. And you've come up with a very clever way of remembering those 8 steps. And so people can know the plan, they can understand the steps, and then they can start to follow that journey. So we're about to start with that, and we'll get through as many of them today as we can out of those 8 steps. It may take us more than today's show to get through them. But you also mentioned just a moment ago, and I really love your conversation when you talk about worth and you talk about our own worth and our net worth, our personal worth, our what we feel. Because when we look back again from the perspective of stress, I think one of the things that causes us stress is that our self-worth has been minimized because of decisions we've made or actions we've taken or words we've spoken or thoughts that were even in our head. Maybe we didn't even act on them, but we thought about it. And then when we're alone afterwards, we ponder what we did or what we said, or maybe what we didn't do and we know we should have done. And that does build up a lot of stress in us. And what you're talking there is self-worth. What you're talking there is how we really value ourselves. And if we're down on ourselves, if we are not feeling good about how we're living or how we're acting or how, our place in our family, our place in our job, if we have a negative feeling about ourselves, that's obviously, a huge cause of stress, right?
Absolutely. You know, um, basically, anything when we focus everything on us, as means this human body, what is good for me, is supposed to make you feel better instantly, but in long term, that is the process which undermines your own personal wealth. Your personal wealth only gets accumulated by adding value to you, to others, to your environment, and constantly thinking. Your mind is constantly working. Either you are uh, thinking about what is going to um, bother you, what is going to undermine you, what is your fear and greed and ego-driven mindset, and or you can bring in creativity, dig in inside you, bring in creativity to add higher value. When you are creative, when you are adding the high value, you feel better. Your self-worth is better. So under most circumstances, we are constantly thinking what is good for me rather than how can I add value, how can I enhance. This is all a matter of habit. Once we have this habit of constantly thinking of what is in it for me, once you realize that, slowly, you can develop a habit of constantly thinking of how do I add the highest value? And your life would transform from into a good health, into having better resources, having net worth, having fame, having name, all those things which you are looking for in the paradigm of what is in it for me can only be obtained by adding the highest value. Right.
And before we get into that first step, I just want to add this for the awareness for our audience that there is a feeling that today's younger generations are much more me oriented than their parents or than their grandparents were. And I personally believe it's true. I don't blame the younger people. I blame our society because we have been advertising to them and promoting to them that it is all about their happiness. It is all about their instant gratification. And with technology advanced, with communications advanced to where it is, the message they've heard their whole life has been, it's about your happiness. It's about you. It's about everything for you. And it's okay. This is good. Life is all about you, and you should be happy, and you should be doing what you want. And with your body and your lifestyle and your choices and your work habits and your living habits and your eating habits and what you wear and how you think and what you drive and where you live, it's all about you. And that's the message that our world is giving to people today. And so it's no wonder that if they're saying, and the experts are saying, that it's much more of a me society than we've ever seen before, it's understandable why that is. That's what we've been creating, a me society. So again, I think while you, and you said it right, when that first happens, when you are thinking of myself and you get what you want, for those opening minutes or maybe even hours, you feel really good. I got what I wanted. I deserve this. This is the way it should be. This is the way they say it is, and this is the way I did it, and it's right, and I feel happy. But over the longer term, over the hours and the days and the weeks that after that, then you start doubting, right? It's like that conscience inside of us that said, was that really what I was supposed to do in spending that money or in spending that time or in having that short-term pleasure? Was that really best for me in this world. And so I'm so pleased that we can present this show, because this is, I think, the alternative plan to what society is teaching us today. It's not all about me. Well, actually, it is. I mean, that's the irony, is that this plan is the best for me too.
Yeah. So I say that we actually do not know how to be selfish. The best way to be selfish, practical way to be selfish, is to concentrate on adding the highest value to you and everybody around you and your environment. Then only you are truly selfish, because the return of that thing fulfills all your fantasies. It makes you rich, it makes you more famous, it makes you everything. Right. So, to get into this whole topic, we have to use a parallel to our lawn. So in order to get a perfect lawn, we must remove all the weeds present in the lawn. We need to kill all the weeds. Otherwise, even if you are watering and giving food, the weeds are always outgrow the lawn itself. So your lawn would be basically weed. Similarly, in order to add the highest value, to become the highest value entity, we must destroy our ego-infested, recognized, starved, false persona. And in order for us to do that, otherwise what happened is, what the question is always remain, can we really set ourselves free of ego and on all his manipulations as fear, greed, and all those things? Is it possible? And the answer lies in analyzing the word add value, ADDVALUE. So there is wisdom hidden behind each of these words, ADDVALUE. And this wisdom, once it is converted into understanding and living and converted into our living habits, and it will transform you into a value adding entity, right?
Those are the 8 steps that we are going to start talking about today. And there's 8 letters in add value, and we're going to take each one of those, and that's a way for people to easily remember. And the sequence is also important. They're not just 8 letters that are randomly chosen. Ratanjit has devised this so that you can walk through each one of these steps first to the last. So we're going to come back in a moment and get into that first step. But before we do, Ratanjit, you were awesome with that great analogy there with the lawn. Anybody who's ever taken care of a lawn, whether you're just a homeowner or somebody cutting grass for other people in the neighborhood or whatever, when you water the lawn that has both grass and weeds in it, you will see that both will grow. And as a matter of fact, the weeds will grow more. So if you have a lawn that just has maybe 20% weeds and 80% lawn, but if you water the entire lawn within a month or so, you're probably going to have 50% weeds and 50% lawn, because weeds naturally grow at a faster pace and they spread faster than the lawn does. And so, to your point with that analogy, if you don't control your ego and greed, if you don't control those up front, not only will they grow, but they will grow exponentially. And if you're on the path to saying, I do want to add value, I do want to increase my self-worth and my net worth, I do want to be everything that you're talking about, it's so important that we restrict the weeds because if we're on this path, but we don't have those under control, it's like the guy that goes out every day and waters his lawn thinking that it's going to be great. What he's going to end up with at the end of the summer is a completely weed infested, front area. And the lawn will be a minimal. I was in the lawn and garden business for years, and I know this to be true. Weeds grow so much more than lawn does. So let's just take that back before we go to the break. Is it a natural evolution that if you start adding value, your ego gets controlled, or is there a step that's required even before the 8 steps to somehow put the ego and greed into the background, and just like we try to kill off the weeds?
We are operating by our habits, not by the knowledge. So in our habits, we have acquired habits of always operating with the ego. So systematically, we have to change those habits. Systematically, we have to control that ego and understand what this ego is and where it comes from, and understanding this. And eventually, once the ego goes away, you are able to think clearly, and suddenly you can start to think in terms of adding the highest value. So all our success, all our happiness, all our relationship, whether it is with the spouse or with your children or with your friends, or leadership quality, whether it's in your organization or in the society, all your financial success is all as a result of adding the highest value. Right?
But I appreciate everything you just said, but I don't know if that answers it. Do we have to take a first step? Is there a habit that we have to engage in to limit our ego before we even start with the letter A in the process? How do we start that with less ego or with no ego?
See, it's not a less or higher ego. When our system understands that ego is only a make-believe, it doesn't exist. Once we understand that, once we discover that, and once we are in the mindset of ego-free living, ego doesn't affect you. So we have to kill the ego. We have to similarly kill the weed for a lawn to be totally green and adding the highest value. So similarly, we have to kill and destroy this artificial or false persona of ego.
So as we take that first step, though, with A, and we start getting on this journey, we should, in effect, understand then that the ego is going to go away. It'll automatically be a side product of being on the right journey, right on the right path.
You cannot add the highest value in presence of ego, fundamentally.
Okay, all right. So, okay, that's excellent. When we come back in just a moment, we are going to get into our 8 steps. We're going to cover the first step. What does the A stand for in add value? We'll find out. This is Stress-Free Living. Please stay with us. All right, we are on a quick break here. Anybody? Kim, welcome today. Dr. Jack Jeet, if you're still with us, whoever has a comment, go ahead if you do.
No, I am still, this is a very good concept of self-worth and net worth. I think we should do much more programs on that.
I like it too. Thank you.
Yeah, so I might be leaving because I've reached the destination.
Oh, have a great day. That's a wonderful event you're involved with. Fabulous.
You're switching from journey to destination.
Yeah.
Kimmy's marching in a parade with 200,000 Sikhs
Good luck.
today, so he's got a big day ahead of him.
very big.
Thank you. All right. So, all right, brother, I think we're on the good path here. Good setup. So we probably will only get through the first three letters today. Maybe
Yeah.
not. Maybe not even all three.
Kim, you have a comment? Quick.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm just listening and I'm thinking about insecurity and fear and how the ego covers that up,
Yes.
how it drives behavior. So to deal with the ego and to let that go, I think we also have to tend to why they're inspired, why they're driven by the ego in the first place. That's what's coming up for me. What are they covering up? What are they hiding? Why do they need all this stuff that the ego says they need? Thank you.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you. We are back on Stress Free Living. Ratanjit and Ray, yours truly, Ray Samich with you. Thank you so much for being with us. As we are about to embark on our journey, the 8 steps to add the highest value, and in so doing, focus on that side of our life, reducing our ego and everything involved with the ego, right? As one of our as Zoom guests here just pointed out, our ego is there as kind of a cover up to all of our insecurities, all of our shortcomings that we have. If we're insecure, our ego grows to kind of cover it, to mask that, to make us feel better about ourselves, to make us look better in front of others when we really don't have that confidence. So everything that's a part of ego, we've done a lot of shows on that, and we probably will do more because that's such a big part of our lives. But all of that we can push to the back, and at the forefront is getting on this journey of adding the value. So let's do it, Ratanjit. A, the very first letter. How does it all start? What's the first step?
The first letter of this add value, ADDVALU, which will make us a highest value adding entity, which is also going to do that unconditionally. The A stands for awareness. Awareness only comes to us when we are part in the present. You know, in order for us to have awareness of everything, us surrounding and all the aspect of life, to be aware, we have to be part in the present. So the question is, fundamental question is, what should we be aware of in the present moment? Should be aware of our profession, or status, or profession, our goals, our family, our environments, our relationship, our wealth, our task, or all these things. Should we be aware of our truth? So truth, once we are aware of our truth, we can serve all these areas which I just mentioned. Without having the understanding of the truth, although we may think we are adding the highest value, but we end up subtracting the value. So in order to truly add the highest value, we have to first understand the core truth, which is ageless, timeless, and which is always there, and which is always going to be there. Now, the problem is that typically your truth is different than my truth. And that's why all our debates and our arguments or discussions are happening. We accept in society, in our world, there are two truths, his truth and my truth. It's basically and ultimately, we have to search for a truth that is universal and complete, and that is higher than nationality, gender, race, profession, possession, religion, color, age, experience, knowledge, and everything. So what is that truth? And where do we find that truth? Do we find that in the library, in books? Or do we find that in technology, in science? Or do we find that in religions? Or do we find that climbing Mount Everest? Or do we find that in space? Where do we find that truth? And specifically, why we have to understand why our truths are different. Your truth and my truth, why are they different? Because these truths are all created by the data gathered by our brain, right?
Mhm.
Whatever data I have, this becomes my truth. Whatever data, but we don't understand that of all the organs present in our body, brain is the most unreliable organs of the body. Brain, because it gathers limited data. What we hear, your five senses, the data gathering instruments, your eyes, your touch and feel, your smell, all these five senses are limited. You can only see a certain frequency of light. You can only hear a certain frequency, certain sound waves. You can only touch and feel certain things. So at best, the data which is gathered by our five senses and fed into our brain is going to be limited and incomplete. And not only it stops there, it gets contaminated by our ego, fear, greed, wants. So that is why my data, my truth, which I gather from our data, never matches yours. Until I have very high convincing power and override your belief system and make you believe differently, and based on my status, my wealth, my intelligence, if you are impressed by those things, you say, why? Because Ratanjit is saying this, it has to be right. So you end up changing your own truth. But still, you don't realize the Ratanjit's information coming to you is contaminated by ego, fear, and greed until he is parked in a different platform. Now, growing up when I was young, my mother was a very well-read a scholar of all these religious scriptures. She knew, as she studied Bible, Quran, Bhagavad Gita, Guru Granth Sahib, Upanishad, all these things thoroughly. And she became a student. And she used to give me some wisdom once in a while. She used to say, the path of success there are two paths to achieve the total success. One is a path of knowledge. And 99%, 99.999% follow that path. So our wisdom given to us when we are young is go to college, get some education, and we expect all education. And she used to say the path of knowledge will always derail you, because the more you know, you realize less you know. So it is like doing a PhD in every possible subject. Thousands of PhDs will make you realize that you know nothing. It's only then you know that you know nothing. You know, when we discover something unique in the science, and there was a interview by a great scientist, Nobel Prize scientist, and this reporter asked him, "Sir, now are we close to understanding how everything works?" He laughed. He says, the more we discover one thing, there are a million more questions arrive. So this path of knowledge is always going to derail you. So I asked my mother, what is the next? What is the other? You said there are two paths. What is the other path? Then she says, this path of wisdom. I said, doesn't knowledge give us wisdom? She said, no. So where do I find this wisdom? She says, the irony is, although we go around the world looking for the wisdom, but the real wisdom always lies within us. I said, wait a minute, do I have to take an X-ray? How do I find this wisdom? She says, it's going to take you lifelong, maybe more, to unveil, to understand this wisdom. I said, my goodness. So I was very disappointed. So looking at me, he says, so well, I can give you a key to unveil, to decipher that wisdom. But it may take very long time to even understand how to use the key. I said, what is the key? So she says, the key is oneness. I said, what oneness? You are there and I'm here, we are two. So she says, that is why it will take you a long time to understand this key. And I read so many books and I went through college. So I said, I'm going to be a scientist. I'm going to find the answer. So this thing didn't make much sense to me, although somehow internally I was always looking for an answer because it was coming from a mother. So this has to be some validity. But ultimately, I would discount her, thinking she's a philosopher. What does she know? So eventually, I came across this quote from Albert Einstein, he was my idol. And I always thought, in his late years, he writes, a person experiences life as something separated from the rest. That's what we experience. A person experiences life as something separated from the rest. Then he calls it it's a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. And then he says further, our task must be to free yourself from the self-imposed prison, and through compassion, to find the reality of oneness. Now, in my stupid brain, somehow coming from this scientist has more validity than coming from my mother. I said, it has to be right, because this scientist in his old age, after going through everything, he's talking about this oneness. So I started certainly understanding this oneness. So I came across this thought process of this human body and what is operating this human body. So it's like this human body with all these amazing organs, with everything making, you eat food, it creates its own blood, it's everything is automatic. It's amazing. We as a human being, through science, have never been able to duplicate anything like this. This is a miracle. And we don't know how to even produce a human being. Natural wisdom produces the human being in the womb of mother. The mother doesn't even know how to produce the child. And now this human body, it somehow it dies. When it is lifeless, all the organs are still present, but they don't function. So then what is this force which enlivens this human body? Once that force is understood, that force is same in every living being. And that force unifies us into oneness. To understand this further, I repeat this example of light bulb. We have this light bulb which are different in size, different colors, different manufacture, different wattage. When they are lit, they become alive. In that state, they have a live wire connection to the same powerhouse, the same source which is providing the electricity to each bulb. So similarly, when we are alive, we are lighted, we are given life by the universal power which is same. You can, if you are religious, you can call it God, you can call it any other name. But that is one single force which enlivens us all. So your mind, your brain, when it is attached to the human body, operated by influence of five senses, this human body always knows that one day it is going to die. It is full of fear. It needs food, is full of greed. It has a feeling of separateness. It has ego. It wants to be superior than others. So all these things are associated with the human body. So if our brain is operated by the influence of the human body, you are always going to have ego, fear, greed, all these insecurities associated with the human body. But if the brain is operated by the universal force present in the body, operating in that mode, this force never dies. It is there before it enters its body. It will be there after it leaves the body. So it has no greed, no fear, no insecurity. So your brain now is totally free of all the viruses associated with ego, fear, and greed. So once you know, if you don't know what in you is operating you and who in you need to operate you, you are always will be full of insecurity, fear, and greed. So to kill that ego, you have to develop a habit of being guided and operated by the universal force which present in you, making you alive. And until you convert this into a habit, you are going to, this knowledge alone is not going to allow you to operate in this oneness mode. Once you operate in the oneness mode, you are free of ego, right?
Ratanjit, I got to cut you off here. We got to go to a break. And we went way over here, but we'll do a quick break and then we'll come back with a couple of quick comments and questions. I think we're only going to get through the first step for today, but it's a big step. It's a good start on our journey. We'll be right back. All right, we'll come back. We'll only have about 5 minutes. That's okay. It was great. I've got questions and comments, but if Kim or I don't know if Dr. Jagjeet is still with us. I know he's ready to leave. Kim, do you have anything for us? Anybody? If not, that's okay. Oh, there's Kim.
Well, I'm just listening deeply, and I appreciate the mother's wisdom of the more you know, the more you know you don't know very much at all. And I think about the moments when I am most ego driven is when I'm insecure. It's when it's fear. That's what's under it. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter. I could just be, to have oneness without feeling threatened, I have to be secure.
Right.
And I think it points to an opportunity to look at ourselves and where we need to tend to ourselves, because as we take better care of ourselves, then we're more available and present to be with others in a meaningful and positive way. And I think about violence, all of the insecurity, all of the fear, that drives people. Why do I not want to share with you? I'm afraid I won't have enough. So I think that's at the root of what we're talking about.
That's all comes from when you're operating in the human body mode. Fear would be there. Fear only goes away when you begin to operate in the oneness mode. That's what we are talking about.
Thanks, Kim. All right, we're back in just a few seconds here. Ratanjit, we'll stay with the A here today. It was a great start. So I've got a couple of comments and a question here for you to come back with. We are back on Stress-Free Living. Yours truly, Ray Samich and Ratanjit Sandhi, taking our first step on our journey towards adding the highest value, which is the ultimate way to increase our self-worth, increase our net worth, and decrease our stress. It's the grand slam, since it's baseball season, the grand slam way of getting through our lifetime. Ratanjit, it's interesting because in this very first letter of awareness, ultimately at the end, you said that will eliminate our ego, eliminate our greed with this realization of the real truth. And that was what I had asked you before we started the first letter is, can we do this with ego? How do we get rid of the ego? So you've made it very clear that the awareness of the truth, which is vital to adding the highest value, that awareness is going to itself nullify the need for us to have an ego. Because if we know we're here forever, we have no greed, we have no fear, we don't need an ego anymore.
Again, I have to emphasize that all our knowledge, education, training, experience, intelligence title, trophies, awards, and wealth without fully comprehending and living oneness will only remain highly decorated and glorified ignorance. All your education, all your intelligence, all your trophies will only remain highly decorated and glorified ignorance without oneness.
You know, that's so strong. It's so, those words are so stark, but they are true.
Yeah,
They
true.
really are true. And for anybody who's ever received any kind of an award in life, or you get some kind of title, or you get something that, you know, makes your ego feel great, but if all you've done is glorified my ignorance, ultimately, then gee, I guess I would have been better off without winning that award, because it just exemplified my ego and my insecurity and my ignorance. The other thing I love that you brought up, and even though we've discussed this topic so many times, and people are dying all around me these days. I don't understand it. I'm just more aware of that happening with friends and family. When you talk about the life that we have as a force, I know that's not a new topic, but it's kind of new for us to talk about life as being this force that is out there and all around us, that is within us for this relatively short period of time. Could be a second, or it could be 100 years, but it's short relative to eternity. And so you really do ponder, you say, you know, why did life stop for that person? Why will life stop for me? And then you think it's just the exiting of the force from the body. It's exiting of the eternal force. It's the entrance of the force at the beginning of our life, of our human life, and it's the exit of that force at the end of our human life. And that's what got this robot, that's what got this being here, this amazing machine that we live in, going for a while. But that force still exists. That is just an actually extremely empowering thought process, that the life didn't end. It didn't end at all. It was just the force coming in and then the force going out and continuing outside of the body. And it's a perspective that I think would make a whole lot of people feel better if they thought about that, as opposed to life ending.
Absolutely true. Now, before we end, we have very short time. I want
Yes.
to make sure that living in oneness, we form a habit. This, so far, it has remained in the knowledge base, how to convert into a habit. So anything you do consecutively at the same time becomes a habit. So to form this habit of living in oneness, what you do is pick up a time in the morning, first thing in the morning, after having a bath and all that, supposing it is 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So at the same time, you have yourself have a bath and everything ready. Now stand in front of the mirror. What you see is the reflection of this human body. And see all the things human body does, great things, and it gives you suddenly a gratefulness that you are gifted with this equipment, with this human body, which is not yours. And then you close your eyes and look into the eyes, and you see this enlivening force present in this human body. You bow to this force. And suddenly, when you come out of this exercise, you look into any other person's eyes, you see the same force. You bow to that force. You have incentive to serve that force. And that incentive gives you a foundation of adding the highest value to that person. So suddenly all the relationship dissolve. You see nothing but the divine force present in your spouse, in your children, in your stranger, in black, in white, in man, in women. All the gender is associated with the human body, not with the force which enlivens the human body.
Ratanjit, we'll have to make that our last note because we are over time here. Thank you for your wisdom today. We will continue this journey in our next show. We've got 7 more steps before we come back and start a little bit more with number 1, 2. Remember, we're all playing the same game. Have a great day.
I'll be right back.
Okay, you'll be right back. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Kim, you and I can talk if you want to. And I don't know if Dr. Jagjit, he was leaving, so he's still in, but I'm not sure if he's with us. Although he's Ratanjit's the smart one to talk to, so you may want to wait for him.
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to plug in. And it always gives me food for thought that I can carry with me,
Yeah.
each week. Expands my perspective because I hear everything through my filter and my experience. So it's refreshing to get another view and perspective that can be considered as well to make me a more effective human being, more loving and kind human being.
We just don't hear this message out there in the world. It's exactly the anti-message that is out, to just worry about myself and just have fun and live for today and live, me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's out there right now in this world. And it's accepted as being the smart way, the right way.
I personally had encounters where I felt misunderstood, where I think people thought that of me, and I was in the midst of survival, like someone drowning, and the people that I was engaging with had no idea what it would be like because they didn't have those experiences. They had their own experiences, but they had a hard time relating and understanding to my experience.
Mhm.
And it was even more hurtful. I had to educate. I had to trust and be more vulnerable to actually share what my experience was like and what I was dealing with. And even still, I think there's a level of it where if it's not your experience, there's only so much you get. You know what I mean? So I think we just have to be respectful. I'm not going to say I understand your pain. Your pain is your pain. I can love you and respect you, but when we're dismissive and, you should just do this and you can fix it quickly with that, it's, I think we create a gap in our communication where I can't even hear you if I'm in pain and I don't think you care.
Yeah.
It goes right back to the ego, so is that ego or I don't know. Is that a disconnect?
Well, you got to have in other programs. I'm not sure if you have ever caught those, but Ratanjit refers to something as emotional deposits.
Yes.
That you accumulate, and you have to accumulate a certain number of those for people to be connecting with you at a level where they will listen to you in those most vulnerable times. And if it's pretty much a stranger, you have no emotional deposits with them. And so they don't know where you're coming from. They have no trust in you built up at all. And so if you just go up to a stranger and start saying some of these things, it's very unlikely that they will connect with you. But if you've earned some of that trust through those emotional deposits that you build up, I think they will look at you, even in pain and in grief, and they'll look at you and they'll listen to you because you've earned that right. And I think we need to be building those emotional deposits with people.
Yes.
So that
have that report about the very successful person, the CEO, the person who's very busy with their agenda and they're focused on that. And I am suggesting oneness and take my meeting or just be with me in a conversation, and they're thinking about, their spreadsheet of numbers. So what are the equalizers in our lives? Like if somebody gets sick, somebody passes away, all of a sudden, none of that matters,
Exactly.
So I think
Ratanjit, I stole it. I
being,
stole another, he just
and
came back. I just let him know I stole one of your other concepts here with emotional deposits, Ratanjit. We've been talking about that.
See, what happens is whenever I do a show or something, and people come to me, how do I convey this to my child? I want to, they are always thinking of teaching others. We never practice these things ourselves. We cannot teach others. We only can practice ourselves. It is by practicing yourself, you eventually influence others and eventually you teach others. So it is all, this concept is all about you. It's not about changing the world and making them follow this. We can basically follow this thought process and develop a habit of operating in the thought process, and eventually we can change the world around us. We are always trying to change others.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
I mean, I think that's how we express, that's how we feel that we've accomplished something. Because if we've touched a particular person, especially if we think that they're in a troubled spot or they're, under stress, then we think that by sharing thoughts like this with them, that's going to help them. But I think so often, again, without the emotional deposits in place, we're not listened to anyway, and maybe we're even thought of less by them on the surface. We're thought of by them as being a know-it-all, or put your it's none of your business. So I think it's a difficult situation because we want to help them. I don't think we're doing it to hurt them. I think we're doing that to try to help them, but we're not well received in most cases.
Yeah, the moment you change others, try to change others, you can share your thoughts. You can share what I believe, what motivates me. And if they catch that, see, the moment if I tell them what to do, I'm putting them down.
Right.
And nobody likes that. Remember that everybody is part in ego. So they are operating in the body mode. Not that they are anything wrong. You have to switch them into the oneness mode.
Well, that's such a valid point.
Yeah.
And it's always the tone too that you do it with is so critical.
So you are sharing information, you are telling them what you are doing, how you are operating, rather than making
what
them
you should do, what
Yeah,
you
what
should
you
do. Yeah. That's
that
really
is how
insightful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our typical training is you are telling others what to do.
Right.
So that itself is because typical training is based on ego mode. So ego mode is making you superior.
What's funny is that it's actually easier to do it this way. It's because you always have to, you're so worried about what words to use when you're talking to people and stuff. If I'm just telling my own story, this is what I found to work for me. This is found that makes me feel better. This is how I do this that seems to be effective. There's no arrogance there at all. There's no, you're not telling them anything. You're just sharing. So maybe that's really good. I gotta start that. start that Monday morning.
Yep.
When I'm dealing with my young people that don't understand.
Dr. Jagjit, are you still there?
I think he's gone. I don't think he turned us off his phone, but he's not there.
Oh, okay. Oh, Kim is
All
there.
right, Kim. Any other thoughts, Kim?
Just appreciate the wisdom in both of you. Thank you so much. And I am going to practice more sharing what works for me rather than giving unsolicited advice, which doesn't help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I did. It's very insightful. That was a great way to end the show.
it
All
is.
right, we will continue.
With my kids, I used to think, honey, when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. But that doesn't work.
We got
Have a
7
wonderful
letters
week.
left. I hope it doesn't take us 7 more shows, but we'll get through them. All right. All right, everybody.
The main thing.
Ratanjit, go ahead.
First one is, the main thing is, this is the cornerstone, this is the foundational
Yeah, it is.